for having me and for putting this together and fine-tuning it at the last moment to reflect the world that all of us are living through. And thank each of you for being here today. I'm going to share my screen, so give me just 1 second here. Whoops, that's not what I want to do. All right, so I would love it if people could put like a 1 in the comments if they can hear me and if they can see my slides. That would be wonderful. Good. Like all of you, I'm sure I'm at home, so my neighbor has a dog. One neighbor is doing the lawnmower, so please bear with me while we all work from home in these conditions. I'm really excited to be here today and to share this Job Search Ready workshop content with you. And actually, this is 85% of this workshop is a workshop that I was giving previously. And so much of the content, much of the job search process actually remains the same, which can feel very strange to hear and even quite frankly to say, given how much has changed in the last few weeks. But what I really want to do is share with you that I refined the workshop at the start of the pandemic when people started working from home. Because most of my hiring experience actually came from the 2008 recession. And I wanted to share a little bit more specifically. I wanted to integrate some of that experience and share some tips for job seekers during this time. And I wanted to share a little bit about what we're seeing from our clients and pass along that information so that it would be helpful to all of you. And what I'd love to encourage you to do is to please feel free. I'm trying to continue to admit folks, and I want you to feel free to ask questions as we go. I'll stop periodically to make sure that I can answer questions as we go. Oh, perfect, Rachel, thank you. And there'll be plenty of time for Q&A. That's a very important part of this is I want to know where folks are at and how I can be helpful today. So I'm just getting my screen all situated. So like Rachel said, my name is Jen. I founded Work Wonders Careers. Actually, today is our 6th anniversary. So it's kind of a big day, even though it's very small in the scheme of things that are going on in this world. And we help people land new jobs and thrive at work. And so we work primarily with job seekers. We're not at all new to this space. We help people get clear on what it is that they want to pursue as their next steps and then optimize their job search accordingly. And so this oftentimes looks like resume writing. Oh, thank you all. I appreciate that. This looks like career coaching, resume writing. I run Work Wonders and Company, which is a community and job search program for job seekers where we help people strategy-wise, but also, time. I was saying to Rachel this morning when we were chatting, it's not new for me to be working with people who are balancing social justice demands and working in their community and care work in the job search process. So my clients are busy people. And so I realized early on in this work that what we did wasn't just about strategy and execution. We really had to help people manage their time and energy in their process. And as you can imagine, that's only more true now than it was previously. If you'd like to stay connected after the workshop, I'm typically most active on Instagram. You can also find me and connect with me personally on LinkedIn under Jenn Walker Wall. And I'd love to hear from you. And if you have any questions, follow-up questions, I'm always happy to chat with people. So maybe you can pop again into the chat and let me know if any of these sound familiar. You are sending out lots of applications or you're not applying to any jobs at all, even though you really want a new job. You're wanting to make a change, but you're not sure how to actually explore your career options. Like, what does that look like? What does that mean? You're feeling stuck and lacking confidence in terms of really putting yourself out there in the ways that you think would help you generate traction in your job search. And by traction, I mean conversations, interviews, that sort of thing. You might be someone who has a job, but given the context that we're in, you might be concerned about possible job loss and you're trying to maybe hedge your bets and think like, I'm furloughed or my company's doing cuts. How can I be prepared in case I need to be a job seeker? And wondering how the crises plural, I think, how this may impact your job and your job search. So let me know if any of those, one or more, apply to you, because I'd love to get a sense of what people are struggling with. All of the above, Megan, is actually a pretty common response here. Yes, okay. So obviously this is a very common starting point for a lot of people. And so what I want to share with you today, this is an overview of what your job search could look like. I want to help you change the way you approach and manage the job search process, particularly for the times that we're living through. And I want to share a little bit about what to expect, why being job search ready, how that's different than just job searching, can help you maximize your options. And I want to take you through our framework. So this is the Uncomplicate Your Job Search framework that we've used for 6 years to help people land new jobs. And we've modified it for these times. And I want to walk you through this step by step so you can see what it is exactly that we do to help people change the way they job search, get clear on their goals, and resonate effectively with potential employers. And we also want to share some context to help you manage your expectations along the way, because quite frankly, after 6 years of doing this, I can absolutely say people have unreasonable expectations for what the job search should look like. It always takes much longer than people want it to. Just knowing that, you might not like to hear that, but knowing that can help you realize that your job search is probably not failing. It just requires a little bit more time. So I do have a workbook that you don't need it for today's presentation. I'm going to drop the link in the chat here. So you're welcome to grab a copy of this if you'd like. This will take you in more detail through the framework I'm about to teach and link to some specific resources I've created. So you're welcome to take a look at that if you'd like to do this, to DIY your job search once this workshop is over. All right. So I want to just start by talking a little bit about being job search ready. And what does job search ready even mean? A lot of times, and this was true, prior to the last few months, people start their job search when they're miserable, when they really are kind of at their last straw in their job. And so one thing we always try to teach our clients is that we'd love for you to be a more passive job seeker, because being picky and being choosy and taking your time gives you more options. And that's job search ready is really like being kind of a passive job seeker. So we want to help you take time to identify your own needs, goals, and priorities. And so you may be actively job seeking, but if you are someone maybe who's worried about job loss or trying to get back into the workforce, maybe you're not in a rush. This is something you can do regularly. Once a quarter, you could really take time to assess your goals and needs and priorities and see if your job is working for you. You can have a resume, a cover letter, a LinkedIn profile, all these other materials could be ready to go if you found something that was really compelling and that you wanted to put yourself out there. Again, you don't have to wait until you're really unhappy at work to begin this process. And also we find that clients who start when they are still engaged or at least not miserable in their current jobs, they have an easier time setting boundaries and taking care of themselves is an essential part of the process. One thing that seems to happen when people get, very anxious and eager to get a new job is they tend to over-apply or under-apply. And when we over-apply, we're often not optimizing our resumes in the way that we should. And when we're under-applying, we're not giving ourselves any opportunities. And so we want to help you be a little bit more strategic here, no matter what end of the spectrum that you might be on. And why is this important? We think it's important because we think that this approach allows you to have clarity over your goals and needs, even if you are not an active, eager job seeker. You are prepared with strategic materials for when the right opportunities come along. And our clients are actively interviewing. They've started jobs in the last few weeks. They've been working and onboarding remotely in new roles and interviewing actively. So we do think that this is very possible for you, but we also don't want people to just think, wow, things are really intense right now, there probably aren't any opportunities available, and opt out entirely. You can pace yourself because we think this will give you options. Being prepared gives you options. And that's what we always want for our clients and for people like you. We want you to have options. So I want you just to think, are you an active job seeker? Are you more of a passive job seeker, just trying to prepare for potential job loss or manage your own fears around that? Are you considering a longer term career change? Feel free to drop in the comments and let me know. Maybe it's all of the above. Thanks, Rachel. And you can let me know where you are Active job seeker, long-term career change, great. I suspect there's a little bit of a mix here, as there usually is. So that's great. Career changers and active job seekers. All right. So for folks who are active, you know, you might be on the, you know, really ready to engage with some of these strategies. And for people who are a little bit more passive or who anticipate a longer runway for their job search, your pace can be a little bit different. And we'll touch base on that as we go out throughout the process. So before I dive in here, here's what I want to say about our framework. We've been using this for 6 years with our one-on-one clients, with our program clients, and in workshops like this. And it has helped people really transform the way they approach their job search and the way they communicate in their job search process, because that's really what a job search is about. A job search success is about successful communication. Now, I'm going to present a series of steps, and we've organized it this way because most of our clients imagine themselves doing a job search as a linear process, even though it's not really linear. It's up, it's down, it's sideways, it's backwards sometimes. And so we're going to take you through a series of steps, and you may repeat the steps more than once. You might be well on your way in some of these steps and need to go back to step 1, and that's okay. So we want to give you permission here. Lacey, sometimes that happens when a lot of people try to sign up at once. So if you are having trouble downloading the workbook, just send me your email, either in a private message or at jen@workwonderscareers.com, and I'll get that for you. Sometimes that happens when a lot of people try to download it at once. So thank you for your patience. Okay, so step 1 in our framework is reflection and assessment. And we find that this is the place where people skip this part because they're in a hurry. They skip this part because it's actually really hard to do on your own. And we find that this is really foundational. And even though it's step 1, it's actually something we do every single step of the way. Before our clients accept an offer, we do a lot of this. So let me say a little bit more about that. Why do we think self-reflection and assessment are key to career success? Because what we're doing here is we're looking for something that's a great fit and match for you. Not just any job. We're looking for something that's going to help you meet your career goals and take you to the next step, whatever that might look like for you. So as part of this process, what we try to help clients do is look for key patterns, formative experiences, unique attributes that mean a lot to them, that are things that they want to leverage as they go forward. We're looking to build a foundation of knowledge and content for your transition that's going to be so helpful. So if you ever sat and tried to write a cover letter or a LinkedIn summary or a networking email and just like not had the words, part of that is because some of those words come from this step. And if you skip this step, you're not going to have the content to really take your job search forward. This part is also what's going to help you compare offers and make a decision about whether you should be job changing at this time. You know, I have some clients right now who really need a great offer to leave what feels like a very stable role. And so you can get really clear on how much risk you're willing to take and what risk looks like for you, because that doesn't mean the same thing for everyone. So we get to say here a little bit about what's important to us. What are our priorities right now? Awesome. Okay. Just checking the comments here. All right. So here's how to generate some of that content. This is what this self-reflection and assessment might look like. We really encourage people to do journaling, note-taking, responding to prompts. There are some prompts in the workbook, so that's why I mentioned it might be helpful to download if you're having trouble kind of generating some of that content. And really what this is it gives you a chance to take ownership over your experience. You probably know that you should be making customizations to your resume. But one of the things that people get caught up in is that they really don't give themselves credit for the full amount of their work, the full scope of their work. And this is a place to really do some self-learning and understand what you've experienced, what contributions you've made, and what next steps you want to take as a result of that. So documenting some of that is really, really important. And when we do it in this step, we don't have to worry about how it sounds. We don't have to worry about if it's optimized. We simply do it to understand our own journeys and to have that foundational content that we can draw on later. We have our clients ask for feedback from colleagues, mentors, and friends. And honestly, we have clients ask for positive feedback. So I want you to think really think through. A lot of folks are very in tune with their areas for improvement. We all know where we'd like to be better at. But what we tend not to be super focused on is what our strengths are. And that's really, as a career coach and strategist, where I want my clients to be orienting. And so going to people that we know, like, and trust and asking them for very specific positive feedback can really help us pay attention to things that we're really not paying attention to right now. And another way that we can do this is to do research, to look at job descriptions, to be looking at company profiles, and to understand what it is that we're actually looking for. Sometimes people see a job description and they think, oh my gosh, this requires way more years of experience or way more skills than I have. And that could be the case, but we also want to give you an opportunity to think through, like, what would be a good stepping stone to a role like this? What do these roles tell you about your interests and the direction you want to take your career? So just because a job may not be the right next step for you doesn't mean that that posting isn't super helpful in terms of thinking through potential companies you should follow, teams you could reach out to, hiring managers you could be in touch with, or even just more information about your interests and goals. So again, what we're looking for in this initial step is patterns and themes, because that's going to help us really think through, like, what is it that we've done that we can tell people about, and what is it that we want to do going forward? So are the things that we have done representative of what we want to do going forward? This is also a place where we can start thinking through what our transferable skills and relevant experience are. And so when we have a whole library of content to draw from, we can really get clear on how we're going to be speaking about our experience, right? So maybe you're thinking, I'm an Excel whiz, but going forward, I want to be doing something a little bit different. So we can think about talking about your technology skills or your analytical skills, right? That's what transferable skills are, is when we take a skill and we take a step back from it and really think through, how can I communicate this to someone in a new way where it will be more relevant to them? And obviously this helps us set clear priorities. So one of the things that usually happens as a result of spending time in this, we'll have clients who are doing like LinkedIn one-click apply over and over and over again for lots of jobs, or they're just hitting submit on everything. And what we hope to do is to have people be clearer about the kinds of roles that they want to apply for. And this isn't about like one kind of job title that you're aiming for, but to have some criteria so that you can spend your time wisely optimizing your resume rather than just hitting submit as many times as you can and like hoping for the best. Even though that makes intuitive sense, it's not the most strategic approach. So here are just a couple of questions that I really like to ask clients. I think, what are you most proud of? Really generates phenomenal content for your resume, potentially for your LinkedIn profile, and also for your interview. So think through, like, what are 2 or 3 examples of work that you are absolutely proud of? Contributions. These don't have to be things that are quantifiable. These are for you. It's going to hit the intersection of your skills and experience and also your values. And that is a very compelling combination of things to share as part of a job search process. I want my clients to think through, what do you want more of? What do you want less of, right? So even in really rough jobs where we're not totally thrilled, there's usually something that brought us in, something that appealed to us. It might not have worked out, but think through, what are the things that are working? What are the things that aren't working? And obviously we want to kind of orient you towards roles where we think there'll be more of what you want and less of what you don't. And I also just want you to make sure you're checking in with yourself, like, what's most important to you? Do you want to apply for a job, that's an hour's commute? Do you want to apply for a job? Are you willing to take a pay cut for your job? Where would you like to be salary-wise? So giving yourself some criteria is really important, because it helps you spend your time focusing on the kinds of roles that are going to be a good fit for you. And fundamentally, this step is about this question: what are we going to do to make sure that you end up in a job that's the right job for you? What can we do to ensure that you're checking off your own professional development goals, and you'll end up in a place where you can contribute and learn and grow? So feel free to drop comments or questions in the group chat. I'm checking periodically just to make sure I'm not missing anything, but it looks like I'm caught up here. So step 2 is where we start thinking about other people, right? Potential employers, potential folks to be networking with. This is where we revise some of that content and that self-reflection work that we've been doing into materials that are designed for other people's eyes and assessment. And I think it's really important that you remember there's a part of this process that's deeply, deeply internal, and there's a part of the process that's external. So when we're thinking about things like your resume or your LinkedIn profile or other things that you're creating as part of the job search process, those really have to be optimized for what other people are looking for. So it's an important distinction. So let me just take you through what I do when I'm writing a resume for a client. I carefully read the job posting and pay specific attention to the qualifications. A lot of times people have this like very knee-jerk reaction. I like the job. I could do this. I do this. And that's a very good first sign, but we really want to think through what are they asking for specifically? Because we want to speak to that specifically. I want you to think about what are the requirements? What are they asking for? What are the needs of the hiring manager? Taking your time to revise your resume to speak directly to what that hiring manager is looking for is so key, is so fundamental. This one step that I'm walking you all through now is can be really helpful, right? It's really just something that changes the game for a lot of people. Now, there's a million different opinions on resumes. If you ask 50 people, you'll get 50 different responses. So here's a tip. Stop asking 50 people what they think and focus on this. Make your resume super easy to read quickly. No wall-to-wall font, no size 8 font, use bullet points, use margins, use white space, keep it simple, keep it clear, keep it concise. Give yourself enough time to do this revision process well, because this makes a difference for a lot of people. I'm going to share with you some tips on how to do that. And if you're really, really struggling, oh, I'm so glad to hear that, Lacey. Thank you. If you're really struggling, if you've been in like a rut and you've been putting a lot of applications out there, I want you just to give yourself a clean slate. Open a brand new job search folder that says summer 2020 job search. Whatever you need to do to kind of bring a little bit of fresh energy and perspective. I'm a big fan of like starting over. I know these ups and downs feel very frustrating for job seekers, but sometimes I just think of those downs as like, oh, it's time to fill up the tank again. Like it's time to rest and then get back on the horse. And so giving yourself a fresh start can be a very good way to do that. So here's what I want to do. This is not a resume workshop, obviously. I shared this is about the job search process, but I just want to kind of give you a little snippet into how I transform people's resumes, because I think that this could be really helpful. So what I have here is a marketing manager role. And what I want to just draw your attention to, I know this is like kind of hard to read, but I want to just focus on a couple of things. So there's things that I would consider technical skills. So for this particular role, that looks like Adobe, Microsoft, MailChimp, which is an email marketing service, social media, WordPress, website, that kind of stuff. And then there are some other skills that are required. So graphic design, layout, typography, those kinds of things. Then there are some soft skills, so organizational, time management, working under pressure, seeking out information, taking initiative. And then there are some, attributes, right? Energetic, flexible, taking initiative, that sort of thing. So that's a lot of content, right? There's no doubt about that. So I just want to give you an example. So paying attention to this, the first thing my brain does is it pays attention to those themes. Kind of think of them as buckets. That's not a super glamorous word, but there's like a way you want to describe yourself, like personally, a way you want to speak to the technical skills, a way you want to speak to the professional demands of the job, right? It's a communications marketing job. So they want to hear about that specifically. So what I do is I create something called a summary of qualifications. Underneath your contact or my client's contact information on their resume, and above any other information they might share, so think that top third of your resume, is the most valuable part of your resume. And if you're using it for something like an objective statement, or you're not customizing or putting any kind of summary there at all, what you are requiring the recruiter to do or the hiring manager to do is to search through your resume to see if you meet the qualifications of the role to be considered as a candidate going forward. And you also probably know that people who look at your resume as part of the hiring process do not have a lot of time to do that. That is asking them to do a lot of work that they they will have to do very quickly, and it might result in them missing some of that important work. And it might result in them not really bothering to do it at all because other candidates are summarizing it clearly and succinctly using something like a summary of qualifications. So that top third is a place where you can take the time to let people know that you check a lot of boxes for them. So let me just give you, these are the questions I'm asking. What are the needs? How does your experience meet those needs? So it's a good time to revisit some of that content you created in the self-reflection piece and think like, what are the graphic design projects I can speak to? What are the email marketing projects I can speak to? Or whatever it might be in your case. What stories, projects, and results can you share that help demonstrate this experience? Okay. And let me just give you an example of what a summary of qualifications can be. So this is 4 bullet points. I recommend 3 to 5 bullet points, right? So right underneath your header, 3 to 5 bullet points that summarize how you meet the requirements of the role, the qualifications of the role. So you can see the required years of experience right away. You can name some of the professional domains of expertise that they're asking for. So print, web, digital, communications, the ability to launch social media campaigns, email marketing. And then there's a bullet point here too about soft skills, right? So you can see that we've touched on several different areas that they were asking for. Now, there are multiple ways to do this well. So I just want to know there's more than one way. We could wordsmith this and add in other things. But what you're trying to do is say, I meet these requirements as quickly as possible. And oftentimes when we do this part well, it actually entices the reader to read your resume in more detail because they say, oh, this person looks like they meet these qualifications. Like, let me look at their work experience in more detail versus like, let me quickly search through their work experience to see if they have what we need to move forward. So this is a strategy that I really like. If you're not going to make any other changes to your resume, this is something to start experimenting with. And I have some additional words, language here that I think can be helpful. So these are some phrases that I like to use to begin some of these bullet points for a summary of qualifications. So I'll let you take a look here. I'll just highlight a couple of my favorites. So I love to start with the years of experience requirement and just naming that as clearly as I can. I like to name the main domains of the job. So if it's graphic design, it depends on what your line of work is, right? If it's graphic design, communications that they're asking for, see if you can speak to that really specifically. If it's something you're really excited about, you can use words like passion, enthusiasm for, And sometimes you'll see words like that in a job posting too. So it kind of gives you permission to really to speak personally to your interest in a role. I also really like proficient in, moving my content around here. And one of the reasons I like proficient in is because people are always saying to me, like, what if I don't have enough of this experience? What if it's not good enough? What if, my mastery of whatever is kind of mediocre? And so here are some things I want you to think through. One, if the position is requiring true mastery of a skill, are you comfortable being the go-to office expert in that area? And if the answer is no, you want to just keep that in mind. It doesn't have to stop you from applying, but just think about that. You want to give yourself credit for as much experience as you have. So don't miss out on an opportunity to share the experience that you do have. So I'm just going to use Excel as an example again. So if you are okay at Excel, if you maybe don't like Excel, maybe you don't want to be in a job where you have to be the go-to office expert in Excel. But if you are willing to learn Excel, if you are excited about what you've learned so far and you enjoy those kinds of tasks, right? You can give yourself credit for that kind of experience and pursue opportunities that might feel a little out of reach. I want you to remember that people who do the hiring, have an idea when they put the job posting out that's going to say, they think they know what they want, but then they start interviewing and meeting people and they realize they're going to have to find someone who has a mix of skills. So I really want you to give yourself permission. Your job is to simply communicate the experience that you do have. You don't know, and I don't know what they'll end up wanting or needing or choosing to go with, but that shouldn't stop you from being really good at putting, your best resume forward and talking about the things that you are capable of doing. Just going to pause for a second and check the chat here. Let's see here. Oh, good. So this seems like it's helpful content. I'm glad to hear that. Do you put the summary of qualifications at the beginning of a resume? Yes, Esther, I do that. I think it's really important that it go there because the whole point, again, is to make it super easy and obvious for people to see your qualifications. And just to keep in mind, sometimes people will have like a block of text, like it'll be long and actually difficult to scan your summary of qualifications. So please keep in mind that readability, like the ability to read your resume quickly, is actually very like is key to the strategy. Can including years of experience ever be detrimental? This is a really good question. I think there's another question here about would showing years of experience open the door to age discrimination? So I think the answer is yes. I think there's a lot of discrimination in the hiring process. And so here are a couple of things I want you to think through. I don't try to take away from my client's experience when I'm doing their resume, but what we can do is really make sure that we're focusing on the content. And so sometimes what I do for people who have, let's say 20 years of work experience and they're applying for roles that have more like 10, what I'll sometimes do is really curate their resume to be relevant experience so that people are paying attention to their relevant experience and not saying, why does this super experienced person want to come into this like mid-level role? Part of what I think happens is it's hard to make, like your resume has to tell a story. And so we want your story to make sense to the person who's reading it. So if you're applying to a lot of roles where you are significantly overqualified, like try to explain that. Are you making a career transition? Are you new to the area? Why does that role look so compelling to you? That can be really helpful information for the people who are reading your resume. So just keep that in mind, that that's part of what they're looking for. You know what, Lacey, I don't know if, I think Rachel said she was recording, so I will let Rachel answer that question. I think she's recording it. I'm happy to send out the replay. What should a career changer put on their summary of qualifications if they don't have any experience in the new field? Great question. I never let any of my clients say they don't have any experience. So maybe you haven't been in a specific field, but I want you to think through what relevant experience you do have. So for example, if you are a marketer going from one industry to another, or if you're like a non-tech professional going to a tech company, think about what you're taking with you that's important. Are you bringing customer service skills if you are aiming for customer success roles? If you are a former educator, would you consider going into ed tech, right? And so, or think about what you're bringing to the table that's important, because that is relevant information. And it's really, really, really important that we share that, and don't assume that we don't have any of that just because we're coming from another field. So Amanda's saying, how would you curate 10 out of 20 years of experience? So the answer to that question is I'd have to look at a specific job posting. And you could actually just use the title that says relevant experience or recent experience. That might be another one, because then you can just include the last 10 years. So that's, Rachel said, it looks like Rachel says, yes, there'll be a recording. That's what I thought. So that's what I would say, Amanda, is like, pay attention to what the job posting, is looking for. Consider using a resume that primarily draws on recent experience. That's one way to do that. Let me just make sure. Good questions here. Ellen, I see your question really, but I don't know what that was in regard to. So let me know if you still have a question that I can answer here. I don't know what I've forgotten at the summary of skills section. Yeah, oh good, I'm glad, Tiffany. Is the summary of qualifications the only part of the resume that we tailor to a job description? Honestly, no. Ideally, the answer is no to that question. It's the only part I'm going to cover today. So I'll share a little bit about an upcoming resume workshop I have later this month. I do think there's other ways to optimize the bullet points, the organization. Like I'm saying, I think to Amanda, like talking about recent experience, relevant experience, chronological experience. There's a lot of decisions to make, and you have a lot more flexibility. That's why I never talk about formatting or rules, because you need to treat your resume a little in a more dynamic way. And remember that it's not for you, it's for a hiring manager, it's for a job. When I look at my clients' resumes, I look at them in respect to a job. That's how I evaluate them. Sure, I can give like, oh, the font's too small, or, you know, let's make it easier to read. Sorry, hi, they really refer to the fact that even if I don't have all the stuff I would want. So a resume can't be completely redone every time, can it? Right, so I recommend that, that people have templates. So yes. So just to be clear, I think your resume needs to be customized for each role that you're applying for. That is absolutely my position. If you are relying heavily on your resume, that is something that you need to really make sure is speaking directly to the job. So what our clients do is they create templates. This is why being clear on the direction is important, because you don't want to be sending the same resume out to a bunch of different jobs. You want to create templates that are optimized for the kinds of roles that you want to be pursuing, and then you can tweak those resumes. What people often do is they tweak a general resume, and it's just not strong enough to align with specific goals. So remember, this is all about how to be a standout candidate, right? Like how to make your resume jump out when you don't know people on the inside who can hand your resume off. But I also just want to point out that customizing your resume when you do know someone on the inside is actually really advantageous. You want to make it easy for people internally to advocate for you, and taking the few extra steps to highlight your most relevant experience can be really, really helpful. So I just want all of you to keep that in mind. And I do have some upcoming workshops that I'll share at the end here. So if people want more resume help, there's literally nothing I'd rather talk about more than resumes. So I'm really happy to do that, and happy to answer more questions. So keep the questions coming. I'm just going to work through the next few slides here, because what I want to talk about next is perfectionism. And so I find that a lot of people have a hard time working on their resume, putting their resume out there, making strategic changes because it doesn't feel good enough ever. So here are some things to do. Breaking your goals down into steps. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say it's not an easy time to be getting work done. So I want you to understand that that's something that's really normal and a challenge that a lot of us are facing. So instead of ambiguous goals like fix my resume, a good next step from a workshop like this might be look at Jenn's reflection questions, spend 20 minutes responding to prompts. And then your next action step can be revising resume based on the job I found on Tuesday. Like those are really clear, they're small, they're actionable. And what I say to clients is 20 minutes, 3 times a week, that adds up over the course of a month. So you don't need to be spending all day of your June, July, August Saturdays on your job search. See if you can find a way to make a little bit of progress every day. And set reasonable goals for yourself. Be compassionate and flexible, especially right now. And this is why we value efficiency so much, like creating templates and really working on creating a foundation of content that makes it easier to produce, because we want these documents to be good and compelling, and that requires work and time. So we're trying to give you some ways to do that that you can implement right now. Creating a submit ritual for yourself. So here's what I do, because I do write resumes for clients. I will do all of the structure and formatting so that it's easy to read, and I'll understand how much space I have. A lot of times what I do, if you're looking for space on your resume, here's a tip. Your name does not need to be in size like 500 font at the top of your resume. It's funny how much space your name and contact information can take up. And so when I'm looking for space, that's often the first place I go, is like, okay, let me have the size of the name, and I suddenly have several more lines of text that I can add. So I'll do the font, I'll do some formatting to clean it up so that it's easy to read. I'll revise the content, I'll sleep on it, I'll make some final changes because I work best first thing in the morning, and then I will send it off to a client for review. This was the process that I used for myself when I was a job seeker. And so just having a series of steps like a checklist, you just get into the habit of submitting these applications, and consistency is really key here. And remember, just because you don't hear back right away or you don't hear back, it doesn't mean anything necessarily about your resume. We're working through a time where searches are taking a long time. So just keep that in mind as you do this. Another thing that kind of holds people back is, especially if they're coming from a job that's very, very difficult, very unpleasant, we might say, that it's hard to really find jobs that they're excited about. Like they tend to be like skeptical and hesitant about everything. So I want you to give yourself permission, if you're struggling to find perfect jobs or great jobs, I actually think if you're going to practice revising your resume and using a summary of qualifications, let's not practice on those jobs that we're most excited about. Let's practice on the jobs that we're 70 and 80% excited about, and just get comfortable having a process to make some revisions, create those templates for ourselves, generate some momentum, and get into the habit of having a little submit ritual so that we can focus on our consistency. When people tell me their job search isn't working, I don't look to their resume to tell me why. I ask what they're doing. What are your inputs? Your inputs are actually super important to you getting traction. And if you aren't putting yourself out there, you're not creating any opportunities for yourself. So just remember that up. Successful job seekers set themselves up for interactions, conversations, interviews, those sorts of things. That's where offers and opportunities come from. And I also want you to manage your expectations about what the process should look for. Like I said, it always took a long time. And now the people who are doing the hiring and the screening are at home with their pets and their neighbors who are mowing their lawns all day and their children. And so the process is moving a little bit slower. It's a little more tedious than it's been in the past. This next piece is around not doing it alone. So it's great that you're here because you know that reaching out for people is really part of what makes job seekers successful, both in establishing the right habits, being accountable, being engaged, being consistent, but also in getting those opportunities. So this is a photo of me and my co-facilitator for my group program for job seekers, Jenn O'Neill. And here are some tips that we give to folks, right? So we're distanced right now, but we don't need to be disconnected. So if you have like a job search accountability buddy where you can give feedback and support and encouragement, that can be helpful. Keeping in touch with coworkers and former colleagues can be something that's very important. She Geeks Out is a great example of pursuing your personal and professional interests so that you can find people that share those common interests and also share common goals. Taking advantage of opportunities like these that are digital can really help. And I'm a big fan of virtual communities. I think there's a lot of high quality opportunities out there to find folks. So I'm just taking a peek at the question. See, okay. Oh, so Ellen asks, how many should we be doing a day? I think that's applications. And are we to sacrifice time to network instead? How much should we spend trying to locate people on LinkedIn to help with it? Okay, so I think this really depends. Like, people run this race of their job search at their own pace. For some people, it's a sprint. For some people, it's a marathon. For most people, it's somewhat in between. And so I tend to think that if you are actively applying for jobs, if that is your main mode here, I think 2 to 4 jobs a week is actually a very good clip. But I've also had clients get traction with 2 to 4 jobs a month. It just depends. Are these all stretch jobs? Are you making a big career change? And the other piece here is, are we to sacrifice time? I don't think of it as sacrificing. I think networking and applying online are very good together. So I would say, how many jobs are you finding that you're liking? What are the themes? What are the job titles? What are the companies that you're most interested in that are coming up again and again for you? Because it seems to me like there should be some overlap, and the people to contact, the people to reach out to, the people to build a network around are people who have these titles or hire people for these titles. And if you're trying to connect with people on LinkedIn, a good way to do it is to find some other common interests. So did they go to your college? Do they live in your town? Do you have mutual friends? If you can kind of think through what the mutual connection is, it can make engagement a little bit easier. So I actually have a networking workshop coming up too. So I will definitely tell all of you about that, because you have some really good questions on these other topics here. So the degree to which you can help people make introductions, forward people's resume on, like, this is a give and take area. It's never going to feel like an equal transaction, and it shouldn't, right? I want you to think about this as just like, we're all contributing to other people by being willing and ready to write recommendations, to write referrals, to brainstorm and encourage people. And also we can ask for that kind of support as well. I think it's really, really important. This is another really important piece right now, is taking care of yourself and taking care of your community and in this process. So I just want to talk a little bit about why I think this is actually foundational to the job search. First of all, no matter what other people tell you, this is my firmly held belief that job searching is not a full-time job. This is not a 40-hour, there are not 40 hours a week of jobs that you should be applying to that really make sense for you and your goals, at least, you know, for more than 1 week at a time. So really, there shouldn't be this emphasis on applying. I want you to think through what relationships or activities refuel you. How can you make time for other areas in your life? What are the relationships that give you energy, where you feel like you're walking on top of the world later? Because a lot of times people don't feel that way about the job search process. It's draining. It requires focus. And so this is why I think making space for this is so important. And right now, when there's so many problems and issues, spending part of your week, giving yourself permission to make, you know, whether it's volunteering or social justice work, part of that process. I think that helps give people permission to continue on with their personal goals as well. So think about what your week needs to look like for you to have the time and capacity for job searching consistently. Checking the comments. All right. So this is the final step, but again, just like the first step and many of these others, this is like an ongoing component here, which is like, how do we assess our job search, right? And this is something that I help people do all the time. And so here are some questions that I often ask. Who have you connected with? What have you learned? If you're a career changer, and I know there's many of you here who are, this piece is really important because, you know, we rely sort of on these external people to validate our job search efforts and our status, our professional status. But again, part of the wins here need to be internal. So what have you learned means, where have you decided to focus your effort? Why? Who are the people you want to reach out to and why? For career changers, that's like a huge part of the work. So I want to make sure you're giving yourself credit for the work that you're doing, even if you're not at the point where you're getting interviews here. How many jobs have you applied for? Have you been invited for interviews? Where do you feel the strongest? Like, what feels the weakest to you? And what are the things that you feel like you should be doing and that you're putting off? So sometimes those are actually really important to people's success. A lot of times people do have contacts in places, but they hesitate to reach out because they need some support and encouragement and someone to, you know, read that outreach email and leave them feeling like confident about it. So I see that a lot in my clients. So think about what it is that you've done and things that you've kind of thought maybe you should do. Might be time to pursue some of those. I really think it's helpful when I'm on a consult call with a client and they can tell me how many jobs they've applied for and how many phone screens and interviews they've had. Lots of people don't keep track of this, but it helps me. And it also can help me if they save their job descriptions and job postings that they've applied for, because I can see how they're optimizing their resume and if I think there's improvement for alignment there. So keeping track of this can be a very helpful piece of the process, especially if you try to ask someone for help or try to make sense of why it's not working. Some people think it's my resume, I'm not getting through the applicant tracking system, but a lot of times I think that there's just not a good alignment with the materials in general. I think I didn't talk about the applicant tracking system in this workbook. I'm happy to, but I actually think it gets blamed for a lot more than it's responsible for. Tiffany says, what do you recommend for a tracking system? Oh, let's see. My clients love Excel, Google Sheets, but also people love Trello, Airtable. So folks who are very analytical love those kinds of tools, and folks who who have like a sort of a more creative or free-flowing sense, like you can do this in a journal, you can do it by hand, you can just save job postings, you can just save the PDF as well. So it doesn't have to be quite as spreadsheet oriented if that's not your jam. I have a lot of clients who are like scientists. So I'm like, have you made a spreadsheet? And they get really excited about the opportunity to make a spreadsheet. But when I work with other folks, sometimes I'm like, you sound like a journaler. So I try to recommend something that's going to make sense for the person, because again, no one way, lots of good ways to land your next job. No one way. Another thing I want you just to check in with yourself on is, are you not applying to any jobs? Like, what is holding you back? And so some of the things that I see that I work on with clients are things like being afraid your next job is going to be worse than the job you have, being afraid of quitting your job. And so what I want you to think through here is, one step at a time. I love, Ellen uses Trello. Yeah, lots of people like Trello. So I want you to think through, how can you take one step at a time in your job search? How can you make friends with rejection? Because that's part of the process. And know that you can walk away or ask questions of potential employers at any step of the way. So if you're not applying to any jobs, spend some time thinking about why. Sometimes I ask clients, like, what's the worst that could happen if you get a new job? And oftentimes what happens is I hear, you know, my boss will hate me, my team will be mad, we're in the middle of this project, I'm afraid my next job will be worse. How do I know it's not just as bad somewhere else? And these are all fears, you know, you can work with a coach to talk through, because they're actually really, really common. What's the worst that could happen? Yeah, it's a good question to ask. I think it's really helpful. All right, so a couple of things. So I just want to, I'm going to continue to take questions. Rachel, if it's okay, if I have a few minutes left to take some questions from the group. So I want to invite those now. I'm happy to stay and answer any and all questions that people might have, and encourage people to be in touch. This is our website. If you want the workbook and you were having trouble downloading it, you can send me your email. I'd be happy to get that for you. Let me put my email here so that you can, Jenn at Work Wonders. Okay. Yeah, I can actually, if Rachel's okay with it, I'll send a link to the workbook so that all of you can see. And then, because so many of you asked very specific questions about parts of the job search, let me just point out, I'm running a job search ready series. So you can go ahead and take a look. We have a resumes that resonate workshop coming up on June 10th. Feel good LinkedIn strategies the week after that. And then the week after that, we're doing networking in a digital world. So you can join us for one. And then there's some discount codes here if you wanted to join us for all three as well. So those, we're going to go into more detail. I love talking about resumes. I love to geek out over this stuff. So happy to have you join us. Tiffany asked a question here about, did I miss it? Where is it? Oh, examples of submit rituals. So, I gave an example of mine, which is the first step is fixing formatting. The second step is revising the content based on the job posting. The third step is sleeping on it and looking at it first thing in the morning before I hit submit. So I need to do, like, really the crux of that is I like to submit things first thing in the morning. I do all of my best work first thing, usually while I'm in my pajamas, still drinking coffee. I don't know why, but that's when I feel my best, even though I literally look my worst. So I'm really focused then. I'm attentive to detail. So I give myself the previous time to do the big picture stuff, and then the detail oriented stuff I'm sharpest in the morning. So that could be one example. Sometimes someone will send it to a friend and ask their friend to proof it so that they feel really strong about it, and then they'll hit submit. Summary of qualifications for those of us who are using passion, transferable skills, and changing industries. Any specific feedback for us on that portion? Actually, I think what you just shared is pretty compelling. So I would really pay attention. I think the most important thing is transferable skills and relevant experience. So making sure that you're giving yourself credit and having someone, sometimes I just say to my clients, like, tell me what you did, tell me how you did it. And we will really be, like, kind of exhaustive in their work experience to really unpack and give them as much credit as we possibly can. So these are not running through She Geeks Out. These are just workshops I'm offering. Oh, but yes, obviously Rachel has really great content coming your way too. Cover letters. Yeah, I love cover letters too. So one of the things that I think about cover letters is I use that summary of qualifications and I use the cover letters to share a little bit more about how that work gets done. So if you think about what you've done as the summary of qualifications, think about the cover letter as how. And again, this needs to be readable. It needs to be easy to scan. The first things, the first things that need to happen are, like, just the same as the resume: easy to read, easy to scan, customized. So just keep that in mind. We will be covering that in the resume workshop if that's of interest to you. Okay. What do you say to people who feel guilty job searching right now while still employed, given how many people are now employed? That's a really great question, Catherine. And I love all the people I interact with because they're always thinking about other people in this time. So here's what I think. I think that if you are a good candidate and you are excited about a job, you should put yourself out there, because when you vacate a job, you will create an opportunity for someone else. And so if you have people, you know, that you can support who are unemployed or fearing unemployment, I think one of the things that you can do is offer to be helpful, write a recommendation, you know, make introductions, have them go through your LinkedIn contacts and see if there's anything, proofread their resume and cover letter, share this content with them. So I think there's things that we can do to support people who are experiencing unemployment right now, for sure. But I also just think that whether people are unemployed or employed, they're going to pick the candidate that they feel is going to do the best job. And you should give yourself an opportunity to be there. And like I said, if you leave a job, there'll be an opportunity for someone else to take it. Yes, yes. +1 to offering help to your network. Absolutely. Awesome. Any other questions? Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. I'll mute myself.
And thank you so much. This was fabulous. And thanks so much to the community for coming out and participating. I cannot believe, I don't even know what time and space is anymore because it's so weird, but thank you for doing this on a Monday. And so like we've said, we'll be sharing the video, we'll be sharing the resources. I'll make sure to include all of Jenn's contact information so you know how to get in touch with her. And if you have any questions or concerns, or if you need me for any reason, feel free to reach out. I'm pretty easy to get to too, rachel@shegeeksout.com. And thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Rachel.
Thank you.